Coming up on Kizmet.
I kept on thinking, why are you just asking for the same girl over and over again? He said sort of everyone has their own masseuse.
Welcome to the Kizmet podcast, where we explore your world of post-divorce reinvention, connection, and your pursuit of passion. Join us as we navigate love's second act. Wow. Welcome to the Kizmet podcast, Life and Sex After Divorce. I'm Kiz, your host, and here at Kizmet we delve into all the messy, unpredictable, and often painful aspects of life and relationships after long-term marriage breakdowns. When my own marriage ended, I was completely blindsided, overwhelmed by the changes happening not just to me, but to my entire circle, from my children and close friends to everyday interactions with acquaintances. And then I met you, Alice. And although I felt blindsided, your story really stands out. If you think that your separation was difficult, I hope today's conversation offers some perspective. A moment to pause and reflect. Alice isn't just a survivor, she's a thriver. Her journey's a beacon of hope, proving that resilience and love can guide us through even the darkest times. I'm so grateful to have you here, Alice. Thank you. It's incredibly generous of you to share your story.
Thank you. What an intro.
And a story that I'm sure is not that easy. Well, it's not easy to hear, let alone to tell. So why don't we kick off rather than going straight into the separation, which we will get to. Just like give me an idea of what your life was like prior to separation. So what was you met Tony when you were really young?
We met, I was really young. I was travelling around Australia and fell in love with an Australian, which is often what happens, and never went back to the UK, got married, had 4 children and loved life. I felt so privileged. My husband ended up working for a big organisation that then took us overseas and just loved life. You know, I just, for literally 20 years, you know, I couldn't have had it any better.
And look, I didn't know you back then, and I acknowledge that, first of all, it was great for you, but also I can imagine you in that life. You're an incredible host. You know, you were raised pretty much in aristocracy on an estate in the UK as a child, all the graciousness, all of the customs, and they just flow with you. Nothing's difficult.
Yeah.
And so
thank you.
I think that lifestyle, I can imagine, would have suited you really, really well. So you lived in Hong Kong and back in London. And then
loved it. Yeah, absolutely. So we got back. We had spent probably about, another 3 or 4 years living in Australia. And then they offered my husband then a role in an Asian country, a CEO role. So we took it because we thought, what fun, in Asia. The kids are all grown up. To start off it was unbelievable. But unfortunately, what happened for me was I became incredibly lonely up there without the children. It was very isolating. So I spent a lot of time coming back to Sydney and being with the kids. So we'd have big gaps of maybe, 6 weeks or so or a month when I wasn't up there in Asia. And so I truly believe that he at that point just got lonely and bored. And unfortunately, he ended up seeing this girl who was sort of half my age. And the biggest unfortunate bit was, I suppose, that he ended up getting her pregnant and then didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell any family, didn't tell me, tried to hide it all. And so inevitably, after a while, he began living a totally separate life.
Okay, and I think we've skipped ahead a bit there. So you had this incredible expat lifestyle. You're living in a home in Asia, and I'm assuming, like most expats, who I've spoken to another expat earlier today, there's staff and there's people that are employed by you, and it's really more than staff. You are in a foreign country. They're oftentimes a connection to the community that you're living in. And so you had a lady that worked for you.
Yeah. We had two girls that worked for us. I say girls, actually, they were older than me, but they'd been living and working in the house for years. And also a chef in the house who I used to work with doing, lots of charity stuff anyway. But they obviously, sort of ended up finding out what was going on. So whenever I used to say I was going back to Australia, to go and see the kids, they used to get very emotional and very protective and sort of say, "Oh no, Mum, you can't go, you must stay here." And I'd always wonder to myself, I always used to think, why are they so emotional about this? I'm very fond of them, and it's very sweet, but, I couldn't work out what was going on. And obviously they knew, because every time, I left, then she came in.
And how was her relationship with you? Did you know her? Like, what was...
Yeah, I did know her because she actually was a young girl who worked in a, what do you call it? Not a necessary, it was not a massage parlor, but a health. Well, so you can go there and have everything done. It wasn't just massages, it was
massage with relief. Is that what you mean?
No, it wasn't.
No. Okay, it was just a standard therapy place.
It was a bit more.
Okay, see where my mind
it was
went.
A bit more upmarket.
Okay.
No, it wasn't that.
Okay.
So so I did know her.
So what was your relationship with her, independent of your ex?
Literally just massages and a leg wax or a bikini line.
So she's in between your legs?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Seeing the works. Yep. Okay.
Yes.
And you were friendly with her. Was she privy to any intimate relationship that you like? Did you talk to her about your ex? Did you talk about your relationship?
No, never. But then what I did begin to notice was that whenever my husband and I went there together to go and have a massage, he always requested her, and I was always put in another room, and so we had separate massages. And then it just seemed to go on, and I kept on thinking, why are you just asking for the same girl over and over again?
Did you ask him?
Yes, I did. He said sort of everyone has their own masseuse, and so like he said, I just like to stick to the same, And I said, no, that's ridiculous. I said,
know exactly what you mean. And so the people that working in your house recognized that this girl had infiltrated your marriage in some way, and so you would leave to travel and visit your kids, and then what would happen? She would come in?
Yeah, she would come in. She already had a quite a young child from a previous relationship. And I think that my ex always had this thing of he liked the thought of, rescuing people or being the one to walk in and sort of save everybody.
Yep.
Or I don't know.
White horse.
Yeah. Whatever.
I get it. And you knew him well. You were with him for a long time. So the people that worked in your home were like, don't go. And you were like, I don't understand why you're saying that. Was there any inkling at that point? Did you question them about it?
Yes. Yeah, I actually questioned him about it. I didn't question the staff. I didn't want to put them in a position that was going to be awkward for them. And their jobs are so important to them, And so I actually said to Tony one day that I had, that there was something wrong and he needed to talk to me, and we need to discuss his distance from me sort of all of a sudden.
Did that happen suddenly, the distancing, or was it a gradual thing?
To begin with, it was gradual. And then there was a defining moment in once when I flew back from Sydney up to Asia, and I literally got there, and he came to pick me up from the airport, and I gave him a big hug, to say hello and give him a kiss. And it was just like holding a pillar of stone. And I remember it just being so obvious. Like I was literally holding this, just a pillar of stone. There was no emotion. Yeah. And yeah, that was a massive defining moment in my life where I realized things were falling apart desperately. Yeah.
And what did you do with that realization?
Well, I then became so heightened to everything around me that I then realized, I walked into the house and I just realized that the house didn't feel like our home. It felt it was wrong. I walked into my bedroom and my bedroom was wrong. I don't know, the blankets on my bed just changed colour a bit, and they were just obviously they had oil on them, and they had stains on them. And I know the girls in the house would have washed them, but I think they had sunk into the fabric. And so every time I used to come back, or every time they would wash the sheets, and I'd look at them and think, what's wrong with those sheets? Why are they like this? And so, and then this one time I literally came back and there was a big bottle of massage oil, left beside the bed. And when you start seeing things like that, well, I'm 100%. But basically, I didn't find out about any children or offspring until at least maybe about a year later after that.
So just to track back, you noticed there were things that you started to notice that were undeniable then. The massage oil on the side of the table. And did you what happened? Like if I'd found that, I mean, and you and I'm very, very direct, as you know, sometimes too direct. I would have, how did you deal with that?
What happened was he came home from lunch one day when we were both up in Asia, and I sat him down and I said, Tony, look, I know there's something between you and this girl.
How did you know it was that girl?
Well, I suppose the massage thing and it was just so obvious.
Just putting things together. So you confronted him and said...
Yeah, so I did confront him, yeah. And so I said to him, look, you have to stop. Please stop now. She's more than half your age. In fact, she was the same age as my eldest son. And he said, oh, look, it's all right. We're only friends. I helped her because, she's been in hospital and, she's had trouble with her uterus and she's had to have an operation. And then he offered the information of, look, I paid for the operation and I've helped her. And yes, I understand, we've become close, but she's just a friend, which of course, every woman knows, no, you're not. It just was obvious, but he still wouldn't let up. I mean, he still wouldn't admit it. He never said anything, nothing.
So are you walking on eggshells? How are you living your daily life with him?
Constantly on eggshells the whole time. And I didn't then really want, he was just pushing me away the whole time. Anything opportunity we had to do together, doing things, he would avoid and try not to be a part of, or he would try and then go to work functions without me. Or when we were back in Sydney, he would not want to come to a drinks thing with me, a Christmas function or whatever. And it really wasn't until one day where I had gone away for a week's break up in Queensland, and I then got a phone call from the chef that worked in the house, who he just rang me and he said, "Oh, look, Mum, I can't bear it any longer. I have to tell you that she is pregnant with his baby." But what was funny was that he didn't know that actually he had also had a baby beforehand with her. Yeah, so really she was pregnant with the second baby. Yeah.
What did he like? Okay, I'm trying to get my head around it.
Yeah. So when he rang me, he'd obviously found out that she was pregnant. Yeah, the chef. He'd found out that she was pregnant and having a baby, but little did he know that she'd already had a baby also with Tony. But he hadn't known that. So she was actually on her second pregnancy with my ex-husband.
Did Tony know?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And she was staying in your house?
Well, at that point, I don't think that she was staying in the house anymore because I think it was just too obvious for him to have her there with all the staff in the house and be pregnant. Yeah, no. So she'd already sort of disappeared slightly out of there and had obviously set up a new life somewhere else that I think Tony was funding. I think it was on an island outside of Manila somewhere.
Okay. So she, just so I can get this straight in my head, she had a child already when she met your ex?
Tony, yeah.
And then she subsequently had a child with him and then was pregnant with the next. Did you have any idea that this was going on?
I knew that he was seeing her still because you can, yeah. But I had no idea that he had any children with her, none whatsoever. And actually, it wasn't soon after that, I think, that we left Manila and ended up back in Sydney. And I thought to myself, at this stage, oh, that's great, because I didn't know there were any children involved. And I thought, this is great. We're out of the country, we're back home. And I said to him, now stop. We're back home. Let's just live our lives. Don't care what happened, blah, blah, blah. We've got a wonderful life. We've got 4 beautiful kids. They're all about to leave school now. Let's just get on with our lives. And he said, yeah. I'm happy to do that. Well, anyway, it didn't work out that way, Like I had previously said, I then found out, that he actually had 2 children with her, and he was just flying backwards and forwards out of Sydney up to Asia I think it was every month, to go and spend a week up there. And he'd always say he just had to go up there for board meetings and, hand over to the next, CEO or whatever. And so I believed him for a while, but then obviously, yeah.
So what was because it sounds, look, I'm neither of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what he was thinking. He's traveling up there. He's having children. He's had 2 children with this lady, and you're back in Sydney and he's going backwards and forwards. How did it evolve?
I mean, really, ultimately, I sat him. I remember after the chef had told me, I got back to Sydney and I sat Tony down on our bed and I tried to get it out of him reasonably organically, and I tried to give him every opportunity, to tell me the truth. And so I sat him down on the bed and I said, listen, Tony, we've really got to give this a shot. I just feel as though you're not doing it on your part. You just don't seem to be in with the whole thing. And I then said to him, listen, even if you have got kids with this girl, I said, please, don't go and ruin a 26-year marriage. You know, I'm happy for you to help her out. I'm happy for you to pay for her education. I'm happy for you to, you know, but just don't go and leave us for what I considered he had done was a mistake. And I truly believe to this day that it was a mistake. It wasn't something that he wanted. She might have wanted it. So, but that's out of your hand, isn't it?
And so when you said that to him, I can forgive this. Yep. You know, we can move forward. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he cried sitting on the edge of my bed. And so therefore I knew, you know, he was in he was in emotional mess, a complete emotional mess. And he'd been trying to hold it together for years, basically.
So how long had this been going on by this point?
By this point, it had been going on for about 2.5 years, I think, 3 years. And, you know, sometimes I look back and I think, oh, God, I just wondered how stupid he actually thought I was. You know, and you know what, I look back on it and think I made a few mistakes. I should have probably said something much earlier. I should have questioned him way more. I should have told his mother. I should have told his sister. And instead I let him take charge of that, which wasn't, I should have done it myself. But I thought that I was doing the right thing by letting him probably go through the process and get it out of his system, and then just realize what an absolute idiot he'd been. And, you know, then to just come back to all of us. But now looking back on it, his character isn't one of a character where he would ever admit that he could ever make a mistake. And I realize that now. As time goes by, when you look back over a lot of things that have gone on in a marriage, or that you skim over and you go, oh, yeah, that's all right. You know, that's just him being in a bad mood, or him being, you know, stressed about work, or him being, but you look back and they are traits that people have, and don't kid yourself, you know, that they're there and they are part of that person. And I can see, he never wanted to admit that he'd made a mistake.
And interesting that even a couple of years down the track and a couple of children in for him, it still took you to raise that with him. And you said he burst into tears and the jig was up. I wonder if you hadn't done that, and we won't know, but I wonder, you know, how, and I'm sure you've asked yourself, I mean, as you do when you get divorced, you do mental gymnastics 1,000 different ways to figure out, if I had done this, what might have happened. And we'll never know the answer. But I think that's really brave that you did that. I think it says a lot about the trust that you placed in your relationship and him.
I thought that I had, yeah. And I suppose me leaving it that long, I felt that person that I had married, I thought that he would come good in the end. You know, he'd get through, yeah. And even if he didn't, and it did all come to an end, that we could communicate still and be together as ex-partners, as you know, and still be a team, you know, with older children and teenagers and stuff like that. But I think he's found that very hard to do, or he can't do it.
So what happened? You had this confrontation in a way, the jig's up, he was upset, and then how did it move forward?
Well, from there, he moved out. And then it was just sort of really, from then onwards, it was just a complete nightmare. You know, picking up the pieces, finding out actually that the children knew before I thought they knew. Before, you know, I had one of my children who found text messages on his phone when we were away on holiday, and they had become very withdrawn for a while, and I could tell that there was something bothering. And they told one of their other siblings, but they never said anything. You know, they held it all in, because I think, again, they probably thought, it'll be all right, it'll come good.
Yeah, hopefully it'll all just go away. And look, I think affairs nowadays, not that I have a comparison because I haven't had an affair, but now with technology, everything's connected. iCloud, so many kids go on iPads and see their text messages and things, and that's what you're saying. Your kids saw text messages, they were adults. But, there's definitely an exposure there. You have to be pretty tech savvy and pretty much all over it for no one else to pick up the pieces.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so your kids found out. So then you had the conversation with them.
Yes.
Was that left just to you, or did you each or together?
No. To begin with, I said to my husband, you better tell them what you've done, or if you don't, I will. He didn't do it. And so I told them in the end. I think we went out to dinner, and actually the children were talking about it the other day. Were they shocked? I don't think they were that shocked, but definitely they have found it just incredibly hard. And I feel sorry for the kids for them having to deal with this, and also for them, they have to deal with it for the rest of their lives because they have siblings.
How many siblings? So 4 children that you had with your husband, and they're grown up now, and then your ex was having children in the time that you were still living with him in your home effectively. So he had 2 then, and then what?
He had 3 of his own biological with her, and then she had one from a previous who basically he's adopted, I think.
Okay. And they're now remarried? They're married?
They married, yeah. They did get married, yeah. Yeah.
How was that for you?
I've just constantly felt, I knew he'd do it because he wanted to basically look as if this was a destiny. He was always going to do this. Of course he was going to marry her. He loves her deeply, or and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. To prove that he didn't make a mistake. And I don't know him, so I have no right to say that, but that's what I'm hearing.
But that's basically, yes, yeah, I feel that. Look, he may be madly in love with her now, and that's great, that's fine. But I wish he just had, been honest right from the beginning. It would have saved so much pain for so many people.
I remember on the pain, when we met, we were introduced by a friend we'd basically both just separated. And we were introduced by a friend who, I remember exactly where we were, Chalice Avenue. And we immediately hit it off. And we were both still in absolute shock and trauma. And I think our children were reeling from it. And, I look back and I remember having the conversation with the 2 of you, because we were all experiencing something similar, it's so hard to endure. You just want to lie down and give up. And financially, that was a discussion that day, was don't do that. Just don't do it. And it's really hard not to do, and not just to give up.
Look, there was a time when I just thought, I can't do this. I took a bottle of wine to bed with me, and I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care about myself. Of course, I cared about my children, and so, but I just, I didn't know who I was anymore as a person and as an individual. I'd always been with my ex-husband since I was 19, and I had no identity of my own. I say I only, and everybody always says you can't say that. And it's not, I'd been a mother. I used to be in catering and had a little business of my own for a while. And I just, I stopped doing all of that. I used to do things, little jobs in between, but nothing that was ever going to,
Well, you had 4 kids. You had a busy expat lifestyle.
So my whole life was the children, and and really being supportive of his career. So that, you know, it was when he eventually pulled the plug, or we pulled the plug on everything. I just literally sat there and thought, one, I felt I never knew the person that I married. I thought, this is not the person I married. How can someone have done this to me when I thought that we knew each other inside and out? You know, I was just blown away. And then the other thing is I didn't know who I was.
I think there's two parts to that. I think and I want you to continue not knowing who you were, but the betrayal and, you know, I didn't have a sexual infidelity in my marriage, but there was certainly things that I discovered that hadn't been told to me, that I was asking the right questions. I was being effectively lied to.
Yeah, no. But I have to just hold on there, because I'm pretty sure I told you this before. After I had because I want to be fair and honest here, after I had my second child, I had my second child at 26, I think, or 25, I suffered postnatal depression, and I felt Tony wasn't connected to me at all. There, you know, something sort of fell apart there briefly, and I had a very quick interlude with somebody, and it was I knew it was wrong. I didn't even want it. I don't know. I think it was self-punishment or something to make me, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. You know, it was a distraction. Well, no, not even a distraction. I didn't like myself. So so I created something there which was awful, and it was terrible, and I regretted it.
Did you tell your ex?
Sort of. Yeah, he knew, you know, that something was wrong, and we worked on it together. We went to marriage counselling together, and we built a new platform off there, and I felt that our marriage was stronger, you know, after that than it was before. So I'm not saying that I had been, you know, I made some mistakes. He was there and he supported me 100%. But I have a feeling we go back to different types of characters with people. I actually feel that Tony never really forgave me. And never really. And so I can't help feeling that what he did was almost
related.
Yeah. And whether he was punishing me, and whether he hated it though, but he had to go along with it now because of children involved and all that sort of jazz. So
with regard to the interlude that you had when you were suffering postnatal depression, I just wasn't exactly clear on whether or not you told Tony or he just had a sense that something, like, explain how clear that was.
I remember telling him I was very fond of this particular person. And so I think without me saying it, coming out in, you know, black and white, I was hoping that he got the gist of it. You know, it's very hard to totally, you know, and yes, he had. I knew that he knew.
How did you know that he knew?
I went away to England for 2 weeks. He basically said, you need to take time out. You need to go and see your family. I had my best friend getting married. So I went back over there for all of that. And I know he sent me there because of that. And he said, when you come back, we need to talk, and we need to restructure our, you know, life sort of thing. We need to clear some garbage out. And so we did. But I think and then that's when we had marriage counselling and all that sort of thing. do you know what the worst thing? I don't think I ever properly said I, you know, the awful thing is I don't really want to call it an affair because I was never even in love with the guy. It was sort of it was a physical thing. And I don't know how to, I just wanted someone to hold me I don't know what it was I was really looking for. I was a mess, put it that way.
And sometimes confession is for the person that's done the infidelity or done the betrayal, for them to feel better. It doesn't necessarily improve the marriage. And what I hear you saying is you were so invested in the marriage, this infidelity was just like a by the wayside. I'm not condoning saying or not saying, but you didn't. It was implied, and you let Tony know by marriage counselling and all the things that you did that was the focus. Your family and your marriage was the focus.
Yes, absolutely. And I genuinely loved my husband, and I genuinely did not want to have a life without him. So I don't know what was going on with me emotionally. But I just lost the plot there for a while, and I can't really explain it.
I like that you can say, look, it was a mistake. You know, I was going through something. I'm not sure what it was, but that's a difference to how it ended up being for your ex. So I think that's what I was going to say, and why I alluded to what had happened in my marriage. One of the things when you have a long-term partner or any partner that you trust and you realise that the trust has been broken, it's about trusting yourself, because then you think, there's something wrong with me because I could have, why did I not know? I should have known better, and there's a mistrust. And I don't know if that's related to what Tony felt. I should have known, could have known back when you had your interlude. You know, there's something deep within us.
Yeah. But you know what? It was just like all our friends said, oh my God, you two, you know, you're just a great example of gone through some terrible times and then got your shit back together again, and then had this whole other life afterwards and a whole new experience together, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I have to say, you know, when we got up to Asia for that final role he did up there, CEO role, it was one of the best couple of years of my life to begin with. You know, we had great fun together.
Yeah, the kids are older, like you said,
yes,
you were travelling.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Massive shock to your system to have it end. You're back in Australia, you've broken the news to your kids, and then how did you recover and move forward?
For the first 2 years after we split up, I have to say I didn't do well. I was not good. I was drinking too much. It was more the fact that I think my family had then said to me, oh, you know, once you get over this, you know, you're going to be fine. You know, you'll find someone, you'll fall in love again. You'll be, you know, all right. And so I think I put my brain already there, which wasn't the right thing to do, because I clearly wasn't there to be doing any of that, meeting anybody. And so I got to the point where I was actually making myself ill. So I then went off to rehab, and I spent 6 weeks in rehab. And I can't tell you how much I learnt from that. I learnt stuff about myself and about processes. Yeah, so much. I just think that should become, those programs need to be in schools, you know, right from the beginning. But so really it took me, look, I'm talking to you now, and this all happened 10 years ago. I feel great now. I've got a granddaughter. My children are amazing. If it hadn't have been for my children, I wouldn't be here today, I don't think. They've been incredibly supportive. So if I was going to be really honest, I think it's taken me 10 years.
And here you are. And look, we're works in progress. You know, in 20 years' time, we'll look back. It's a pivotal experience, right?
It's a constant working at it. life changes, ebbs and flows, and you go through good patches. I had 25 years of bliss, and it's almost that funny thing of it had to stop. It had to come to an end at some point.
I don't know that I believe that, but I definitely believe that life ebbs. There's ebbs and flows.
Absolutely. And you have to work bloody hard at it. And you have to work bloody hard on yourself as well. It's not other people. It's you. You need to look at you and inside you, and you've got to pull on all of those emotions. You've got to have forgiveness. You've got to have so much. I just think, forgiveness is a key thing. I can't go on spending my life hating or, I just can't. Or regret, actually. None of it.
I've mentioned it before right now, but, people say, oh, your marriage failed. I don't think of my marriage as a failure. I think it was a huge success. We created a great family, and my life has just moved on to something else now.
Do you know what? That is exactly it. That's all I wanted as well from my ex, was I wanted to come together and just say to each other, you know what? We had 25 years of amazing times, and I don't regret any of it, and I just loved all of it. What an experience.
And I can hear the love that you have now. So what's the relationship with him like now?
Well, the sad thing is he doesn't want to talk to me. I think really his new wife is she's a bit paranoid. She doesn't want me anywhere near. So he's not allowed to talk to me. So I actually haven't spoken to him in a few years. So, yeah, it's a bit sad. And that's what I feel sad about. I would love to be friends. I'd love to be friends. I'd love to get to know her better.
Oh, you're taking it too far for me now. I'm like, I don't know about that.
It's different natures. I don't care. I want everyone to be happy. I want my children to be happy. I want them not to... I just can't stand. Life's too short.
But I also want to acknowledge that all emotions, anger, sadness, it's great to be happy, but we are a gamut of emotions. We're a wild tapestry.
And I still go up and down, with it all. And I still sometimes catch myself thinking, oh, if only I'd done this, or if only I hadn't done that. And was that really, of course, and I will do for the rest of my life. That'll never change. But I feel as though I've reached a point in my life now where I'm content. I feel happy with the way that I have processed it and gotten out the other side, I believe. It's a different side than what used to be. It is completely different, and I feel as though I'm almost a completely different person as well. Maybe I've grown up and learnt a lot more than I ever thought that I could in life. I don't know. And with all those experiences, you've got to utilise them. You can't just throw them to one side.
I wish we learnt the most through the happy experiences, but for whatever reason, it seems to be through the challenges that we learn the most. And you've certainly done a deep exploration into yourself, and you've got a great relationship with your kids. And I value you as a dear friend. You're a special human.
Well, vice versa.
Yeah. So thank you so much for spending time today. We're going to finish up. I know you're away at the moment, so you've taken time out of a valuable holiday. So great speaking to you, honey.
My love. Okay.
Mwah.
Bye.
On the next episode of Kizmet.
It was really, really scary. Getting divorced after a long marriage is like getting into a tumble dryer and you are just kind of spinning round and round, and you have no idea when it's going to stop, and you're going to be let out, and you have no idea what the world's going to look like when it does.
So true. Don't miss an episode. Hit subscribe where you're getting this. Follow our socials and ask any questions on my new website, where we're building for like-minded people wanting to reconnect.